Okay, so here we are in Potato Shop, and first thing we need to do is set up a new document, and we're going to make this document 1000 by 1000. 72 DPI is fine, and click OK to that. And it's made it black, but that's okay. And the first thing we need to do to this document is to give it some color. So let's bring up our color swatch here, and my eyes for this character are going to be blue. So I'm going to select a blue color, go for something a little lighter than that, something up in this range is fine. Not too contrasty, but that's going to be fine. And you can always play with this, and don't worry too much, given that we will probably put some adjustment layers over the top. So just go OK to that and create a new layer, and use the paint bucket tool and paint in that layer. So with that layer selected, we're going to go up to our filters, and we're going to create add noise. And the setting we'll use, that's probably pretty close, around about 100% is what you need. You can probably go a little bit more, and just go OK, and just duplicate that layer for now. Duplicate layer, so we've got two of those noise layers. Hide the one underneath, we'll get back to it. Or actually hide the one on top. Select the one that's not hidden, and we're going to go filter, blur, radial blur, and it'll come up as a spin type blur. We want a zoom blur, and wind that up, wind it right up, go all the way to 100, and quality is best, and we'll go OK. And what that will give you is this cornea type pattern. And if we just bring up Control T to rescale it, and if we hold the Alt key, we can scale it from the center, and we just want to scale that up, and just so that we know where our center is as we're rescaling, and because it doesn't quite appear center there, we can go View, actually we've got to enter that. Now we can go View, New Guide, and we know that our document is 1000 by 1000, so we can make a vertical guide at 500, and we know that will be in the middle, and we'll go View, New Guide, Horizontal Guide, 500. And now we know that's right in the middle, and as suspected, that map that we've just created is not quite in the center, so we'll line that up in the center, and that's working fine. And then with our other noise layer, we're going to do the same thing. Okay, same operation again, filter, blur, radial blur. Only this time we want to reduce the amount a little bit, come back to about 70. I'll make it about 55 and just go OK. And then Control T and hold down Alt to scale that up, and hit Enter. And what we're going to do, just go Control T again and just rotate it a little bit, not too much, and hit Enter. And then we've just got to make sure that's right in the center again, and that's looking pretty good. Now we'll just go in. It's probably a little bit too crisp, so let's go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we'll reduce the radius on that blur a little bit. Go to about 1 on the radius, and go OK. And we'll just hide that top layer, and we'll do the same on the bottom one. We're just going to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we'll put maybe about 0.5 on that one, and just unhide the other. Now the top one, we're going to highlight the layer mode here, and we're just going to arrow down until we find something that we like. That's not too bad there. Multiply. So multiply is giving us something that we like there. So we've got a multiply layer over the top of a normal layer, and now we're going to create a new layer again, and we're going to select a elliptical marquee tool, and we're going to hold the shift button and drag to get a perfect circle. And we'll probably make it a bit smaller actually. We'll make it about that big, and then we'll drag that into the center. That's it there. And we're going to Control Shift I, which is going to change the selection from being in the center to being on the outside. And we're just going to use a paint bucket tool. We'll swap the colors around so that we're using black, and we'll paint in the outside. Control D to get rid of the selection, and then we'll go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and this time we'll ramp it right up. Something like that. We'll go OK. So it gives us a nice sort of outer edge there, and then we're going to do the same again. We'll highlight the normal, and we'll keep coming down until we get something that we like. I think an overlay is probably going to be overlay's not working. Soft light's probably the way to go, and then we'll just reduce the opacity a little bit, and that's probably going to do nicely. And just gives us that sort of edge around the outside, remembering that we've always got a bit of reference that we can have a look at, and that's probably not the best one. This one's not too bad, where you've got your outer area that's sort of got a bit of a dark ring, and then it goes into a sort of a lighter area towards the pupil. So we'll just use that circular marquee tool again on a new layer. So we'll create a new layer, and we'll drag out from somewhere up in here using the shift button. That's probably about as big as we need, and then we can move this over, line it up in the center, and the color we need is white, and use the paint bucket on the new layer. Control D to get rid of the selection, and with that layer selected, we'll go Gaussian Blur again, and something like that's probably good. And then we'll just go Control T just to scale this down a little bit. Something like that's fine, and we're just going to do the same process again and try and find a nice layer mode that's going to make it work nicely. I think an overlay on the light color is going to work. Yeah, overlay seems to work nicely there. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is to add an adjustment layer over the top, and we can do that by using the adjustment layers button down the bottom here. And we're going to use a brightness and a contrast overlay or adjustment layer, and we're going to contrast it up and just maybe bring the brightness down just slightly, something like that. And it looks like maybe our darker layer is just a little bit too, our outside dark layer is a little bit too heavy, so just bring the opacity of it down a bit. And that looks like it's working nicely. So we'll just hide those grids, those guides, and I think that's going to work for what we need. We can always come back into this, so just leave Photoshop open for this process. We're just going to go File, Save As, and we're going to call this, we'll call the PSD iris, so that we can always come back and make any changes if we need to, and just save. And then we're going to File, Save As a TGA, Iris TGA, go OK. 24 bits is fine, we don't need any transparency. And now we'll switch back over to 3D Max, bring up our material editor, and Iris. And what we're going to do is click on the diffuse swatch and select bitmap, navigate, go TGA, Targa, and select the iris that we just created. And it'll come up in the viewport there. You can start to see how that highlight is going to work on with that extra detail. It's going to look quite nice. And just go back into that actually, and in the bitmap parameters, just change map channel to 2. And the reason for that is we want to just use a unique UVW map. So select your eyeball, right eyeball will do for now, and just above the edit poly we want to bring up a UVW map, which is just off screen. I can probably drag it down here, UVW map, and we want a planar map, and we want to change it to map channel 2. And we'll just bring up our material editor and highlight the show in viewport, and you'll see the difference there. This one has a material map, a planar UVW map on it, and this one doesn't, yet the same material is applied to both. And it just allows you, it just gives you a little bit more control. If I was to highlight that UVW map layer and scale, I could scale this in, and in the material editor under the map I can switch off tiling, and that will show me exactly where the map is. And I could scale it out, scale it in, something like that's probably going to work nice, so that way we can get a little bit of this dark edge around the outside there, and that's going to work nicely. Now what we can do is right click on the UVW map and just select copy, and then on the other eyeball, the left eyeball, we can right click and paste, and now we have identical UVW maps there. And we'll give that a quick render, and that's working nicely. Got something happening down here in the corner, so we'll check that out. And I'm not too sure what that is, but we can certainly find out. So we'll just highlight the cornea, and I'm going to right click and hide selection. Whoop. Right click, hide selection, just to see if it's the cornea causing the problem or it's the map that we've just done. It looks like it's the cornea, and it looks like it's probably a reflection, so I'll unhide. I can just undo actually to bring that back. If I change the angle, I should get a different result if it is the reflection. And it is, yeah, it was part of the reflection map. It just happened to be the angle that I was at that point in time. And it looks to me like our eyes might be a little bit too far out on the character. So let's just go up into our layer manager, highlight the eyes layer, hit the select objects button, which brings up our eyes, and we'll use a move. We'll make sure it's a local move, a view move, and we're just going to move back in the Y axis, and that's probably a little bit better. It's going to work fine. I think now that we've given those eyelids some mesh smooth treatment, we need to maybe increase the shell amount. So just go back into the shell and increase the shell. Let's go up to about 2.1. We'll do the same on this one. 2.1. I think that's going to work a little bit better. So we'll see how this guy's looking now. And those eyes are looking pretty good. There's probably not too much more that we can do with them. The specular highlights are working nicely. The reflections are all working nicely. We've got that specular happening in the iris. We'll just check that iris specular to make sure it's okay. We'll probably just reduce, just play with that slightly. Have a look at that render again. I think we can probably increase the amount of, so we're just in the iris map here. Just go into the iris map and probably increase the specular level to about 42, but then bring the gloss up just slightly. Yeah, let's go to 20. We'll see how that goes. And that's going to work fine. Probably a little bit. It looks like the iris might have just a little. The cornea just has a little bit too much reflection happening on it. So we'll go into the cornea settings, and reflection. We're just going to wind that down to about 16. And that's working a little bit better. Okay, so it looks like he's ready for us to do a little bit of rigging, and it's not a very complex rig that we're going to be using. I'll just hide the character, so all we need available are the eyes and the eyelids. So we'll just hide the body, and we can put the lights into the set. So we'll select all the lights and select the set layer and plus, and so the only thing available now is our eyes. And what we can do is move on to the rig. First thing we need to do is create a look at constraint, or a look at controller, that will also serve as our eyes control object. And from a front view, we'll switch on grid for a moment here. From a front view, we're going to, in our creation panel, select the helpers, and we're going to go, we might go a point helper, and just draw out a point helper about there, roughly in the center. So it's a little hard to see. I'll bring it down so that you can see it a little better. So there's our point helper, and we do have some settings that it has. We're going to tick box just so that we can see, and we're going to increase the size to about the size a bit bigger than the eyes themselves. So that's fine. Constant screen size is not that important. But draw on top is always a good idea, just in case it falls in front of some geometry. Geometry tends to have the preference over the viewport, so any dummies tend to disappear, even though they're in front of geometry. So that's a pretty handy one to tick. We've got center marker, we can tick it, axis, tripod, but that's pretty much all we need. Cross and boxes and draw on top is pretty much all we need. Now what we're going to do is we're going to align it to the center. So we'll right click on our X coordinates down the bottom here, we'll right click on the Y, and we'll right click on the Z, and that's going to pop it down to the bottom. But what we're going to do is use our align tool and select our either one of the eyeballs, but we only want to align the Z position, the Y position. And notice that it stays right in the center and it's up level with the eyes now. So that's what it looks like there. It's right in line with the eyes. We're in a top view now, and we want to move our dummy out in front of the eyes. Probably about that far is fine. You know, quite a ways. You don't want, if you don't have your eye look at constraint too far enough out, you can actually get some deforming in the eyes as it starts to move around, and your character can look a little bit cross-eyed. So make sure it's far enough out. That should probably do us for now. Now go back to a front view, and in a front view it's a little bit misleading. It looks like that dummy is right in where the eyes are, but we know that it's not. We know that it's out here in front of the eyes. So we'll probably just leave it in that configuration for now. And what we want to do is select the right eyeball, and then we're going to come up to our motion tab, and then we're going to click the assign controller tab so that we can see inside it here, and we're going to highlight rotation, and then we're going to assign controller, and the look at constraint is the controller we're going to use. And straight away we've got some new controls down here. We've got the look at constraint controller. We're going to tick keep initial offset, and what that does is allows the eye to keep its initial position when we use the look at, or we use this dummy as the look at. So if this wasn't ticked, this eyeball would look straight at this dummy and it would go slightly cross-eyed. It would sort of kink in a little bit to look directly at the dummy. We want to keep the exact position that it is at the moment, so that's why we tick this keep initial offset. We want to click the look at and click the dummy, and then just click the look at again to deselect, because you can keep selecting objects down here and give them various weighting. Now we want to do the same with the other eye, so click the left eyeball, slide up, go into rotation and add constraint, assign constraint. Look at constraint is the one we want. Click OK, slide down, keep initial offset, and look at constraint, the dummy, and then untick the look at constraint. So now when we move our objects around, we do have a little issue here. You'll see what's happening in the eyes, and that's because we didn't do some linking. So when we come back in here, we just need to do a little bit of linking here. So this view should probably give us what we need. We want to select the cornea, and we want to use the link, select and link, and we want to drag from the cornea to the eyeball, and then we want to select the right pupil, and we want to drag from the right pupil to the eyeball. We got it there? So with it selected, right eyeball, we can even bring up H and right pupil, sorry. We can bring up select by name, and it says select parent up here, and we want the right eyeball. There it is there, link. So now if I come back out to this view again, we haven't done the left eyeball, but I'll show you that we've fixed that problem. You'll see the left eyeball still not right, but the right eyeball is working perfectly. So we now need to do that with the left eyeball. So if we select the cornea and link to left eyeball, and we come in and select the pupil and where is it? We link to left eyeball. So we'll now just go back to the front and make sure that that's worked properly. And everything's all linked up now and working the way it should be. So that's our look at constraint. That gives us our look at object. So as we're animating, we can just use this to have the character look at whatever we want, and it can plan and think back, and all the various. We'll go through that in another tutorial. The various eye positions when we do a little bit of facial animation. We'll go through the various eye positions and how they're relative to various emotions, and we'll have a far more in-depth look at that at a later stage. So that's it for the look at constraint. So the next thing we need to do is just give it some blink controls. So we want to be able to wire these blink spheres into this eye controls operator. So with that point helper selected, we're going to rename it eye controls, and now we're going to just create a couple of dummies to wire these to. Very simple rigging.